Perfect. Okay, hello everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Welcome to our webinar. So the topic of today's session is the cybersecurity challenges MSPs are facing in 2026 and how one MSP is handling them. So today, this isn't going to be a product pitch. Instead, the goal for myself and Patrick from Nutbourne is to have essentially an open conversation. The aim of uncovering the sort of challenging situations maybe other MSPs like yourselves may have experienced in the world of cybersecurity. And provide insight into how Patrick and his team have ultimately reacted to those situations. So if anybody has any questions as we run through this session, please feel free to use the chat box. We'll be happy to answer. But firstly, we need to give a little bit of context as to who we actually are. So firstly, my name is Nihil. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer at usecure. So my entire focus within usecure is making sure that we understand the challenges that our partners are facing, the challenges that their clients are facing when it comes to human risk specifically. And then to make sure that we have the sort of process in place to help our partners turn those human risk challenges into a managed and measurable service. What we can then do is help turn human risk from a long-standing problem child into something that can actually empower clients and ultimately help you as an MSP to grow as well. So joining me today is Patrick, who's the co-founder and technical director at Nutbourne. Patrick, it's brilliant to have you on the session. Thank you for joining us. Could you just give a quick intro to yourself, please?
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's really exciting to be here and talk about this. We've only got 45 minutes, but we're going to have to try and wrap this in really fast. There's so much to talk about. Yeah, I'm, as you mentioned, the technical director over at Nutbourne. We're an MSP in the UK. I'm also co-founder of a platform called Clear Benchmark, where we talk about road mapping and bits. And, you know, I, over the years, have been really wrapped up in this client engagement around, bringing them on a journey around security, because MSPs struggle with this all the time. So in my role at Nutbourne, that's what I do a lot of the time, is help the clients understand the journey they need to go on, explaining the risks to them, taking them on that process.
Brilliant. Yeah, I think that's a movement that a lot of partners are trying to get towards, is building more of a story, trying to interconnect different parts of cybersecurity rather than having them as disparate vectors, and helping to build like an understanding that all of these things are interlinked. They're not isolated elements of security. They all need to combine basically to create something more robust.
Yeah, traditionally we're very good at talking about jargon and acronyms and systems and software and all this stuff that we see in the channel all the time. And obviously that doesn't translate very well to people who don't really care about IT most of the time. They just know that they have to have an MSP or they have to have someone to support them, but really all they care about is their laptop works and they can do some work in the morning. Yeah. So we need to find ways to take all these things that they should be doing and they need to be doing and make them relevant and make them useful to them. And that's I think what we're seeing so much of at the moment.
Exactly. And like you alluded to, there's quite a lot for us to squeeze into this session. There's a lot of vectors to uncover. And obviously we'll go through this in a little bit more detail, but I think the high level ones that I think we're all really aware of in terms of like main challenges that partners are facing. We know SMEs are being targeted more than ever by cyber attackers. We know there's a growing wave of compliance, asking people to tighten up how we're all operating basically. Yep. And the routes of attack, the compliance, the technology, they all evolve incredibly quickly, quicker than ever. And so maintaining our efficiencies while we keep up with all of those different elements is a big challenge.
Usually.
So yeah, before we run through some of those topics and obviously go through, Patrick, how you guys are handling them. Obviously we've given a bit of introduction to ourselves. It's important to understand who we actually represent. So I'll go first with usecure. So sure. Again, our focus as an organization is entirely on the human risk element of security. We feel like the people in the infrastructure are often the most neglected part of a security ecosystem. People have understandably invested a lot into networks, into infrastructure, into the environment around the person. But naturally, those environments aren't completely foolproof. And what we feel is that there's an end user layer that is often not given the requisite training and education and processes to help them to become a layer of security rather than that stereotypical weakness. And so we do that through adaptive training that's personalized, through phishing simulations, through document management so we can communicate key company policies, and also dark web monitoring. Usecure is built for the channel. So a huge part of my role is making sure that I can understand our partner base, understand the actual challenges that they're facing, and then make sure that we have the right processes to support them with those challenges, which is exactly why we're having this conversation today. So yeah, Patrick, you okay to give a bit of a brief introduction to Nutbourne as a whole?
Yeah, who we are. Yeah, I think as already said, we're an MSP, fairly classic size. We're over that initial sort of £1 million barrier. We're up in the sort of about £3 million size, and there's about 35 of us at the company. So we have a range of clients, and we tend to focus quite a lot actually on the membership, professional, charity organisations. That's the kind of world we do quite well in. But we have lots of different types of clients that we work with. Predominantly SMEs, so sub sort of 500 user size companies. But everything down to sort of, even 5-man, people, companies, little companies that need support, because everybody needs that outsourced support. Everyone needs that help. We also have a couple of companies, or quite a lot of companies now, who have some in-house IT support as well. They have some knowledge in-house, and then we work with them to augment that and give them sort of some of the specialist skills, which maybe they can't afford in-house, or they don't understand they needed in the first place. Or as you mentioned earlier, strategy, roadmap, high-level concepts.
Great. And that's something I want to dig into maybe a little bit later, is that you guys have like a roadmap and strategy offering at Nutbourne to help your clients to grow long term. I think that's a really interesting.
Yeah, we can. Yeah, absolutely. It's almost not optional, really, and it can't really be. That strategic piece is what we should be there for as MSPs, to sort of provide that guidance. The days of break fix are gone. Like we're already starting to talk about what AI and all these new things bring, and like we're still seeing, and we have all our own problems as well, but we're still seeing people trying to claw themselves into this MSP world from break fix still, and there's this new world that's emerging ahead of us that is quite terrifying as well. So it's a constantly evolving environment.
Yeah, and that again is the whole topic of today, is like you say, making sure that people I suppose can get an understanding about how to move maybe from that break fix to more of a modern MSP model, but then also looking ahead and thinking,
Yep.
If we're not even at that point yet, there's a change coming in the future. What practical steps can we put in place to make sure that partners are evolving and adapting in ways that fit for them as an individual MSP, but also to what their market actually needs from them. So great, perfect. Thank you, Patrick. So obviously, we're going to go through how Nutbourne are handling those challenges, but I think it's important to almost take a step back and think about what's changed in the MSP world, what's been getting harder, and I suppose the factors that are causing those. So I guess, Patrick, from your perspective as technical director, as an MSP co-founder, what would you say is actually harder for you guys in 2026 than it was maybe a year or two ago?
I think it's fair to say that the MSP industry has always been hard. Like, it's always been a difficult thing. We live in an unregulated world at the moment, and that is not great, because it makes it very difficult to stand out and to do all the things you need to do right in a world where maybe there are other competitors who aren't necessarily doing things quite in the way that you want to do, or quite as mature as you. So that's doubly hard when you've got a client base who doesn't understand what an MSP is and what an MSP should be delivering for them. So we find that clients are wanting more constantly. They're more educated than they were, and they ever have been. There is more information in the news, quite sensationalist as well, a lot of it, which makes people ask questions constantly and challenge what they want, but they haven't suddenly released huge budgets to do that with. So there's sort of wanting more for the same, that you're needing to mature into that space. And as always, like, if you're not talking to them and telling them that it's their problem and it's their risk, then they're going to try and hold you accountable to that afterwards. So you're sort of being held accountable for more, and having to deliver more to a more educated client base in an unregulated space where there is no perfect, and this is what it looks like. So it's a bit of an all-out nightmare at the moment, really, trying to do that, because you've got to constantly be proving who you are and your value to the client, and at the same time telling them that they've got to move forward and do a bit more and do a bit more and do a bit more.
So you mentioned that clients are becoming more like educated on their own back. Do you
Yeah.
find, maybe off the back of like sensationalist news that you mentioned, that does that education almost to a certain degree lead them sometimes down like a counterintuitive path where you have to then try and get them back on what you deem to be the right track, or does it actually potentially make your life easier because they've got a better baseline knowledge about the type of things that you're trying to speak to them about?
I guess it depends how you approach it. Sometimes it can sort of send them off down a route which is a bit, big. And I always say that, a lot of this is about getting the basics in place. So, when you've got people talking about we need MDR, all these acronyms, SOC, SIEM, different things that are going on, but they haven't got, basic security in place, or a good antivirus product in place, or they haven't got a good email security product in place, or they haven't even turned MFA on, for example, to their systems. It's about sort of bringing it back to reality and building it in a really sensible way. And as a channel, we're not built for that because, anyone that's been to an event, walks into a distribution room, there's a million different people there willing to sell you 1,000 licenses or 2,000 licenses or something, and then trying to, you go out and try and sell that product. And again, as I said earlier, it's about taking it back to what are the actual problems that people are having, and then having these items in your stack, which are really important to fill the risk gaps in a sensible way. Because as the clients know a bit, it's all about, a little bit of knowledge can be a dangerous thing, and actually can sort of push them in the wrong direction. And we've got to, take that, put our arm around them, and bring them on a journey.
Absolutely. And you mentioned there about when you go to these events, there's obviously a huge range of different
Yeah,
vendors and different
yeah.
vectors in cybersecurity. Are there any areas in the sort of ecosystem where you're seeing clients become more risky or more concerned about as well?
I think people are very aware of the fact that they need the human element, as you've mentioned already. That is becoming an important thing. That they're aware that their staff are a vector. Since COVID, we've had a lot more remote working, a lot more people in sort of diverse locations and areas, and people are becoming aware of that risk. Um, Even if it's not the risk, they're just aware they're not seeing their staff in the same way because a lot of people are working from home more, some of the days of the week, and that's just a peak. When you start asking questions like how do you know your staff are working in safe ways, but what it's also brought in is this whole bring your own device thing, where actually we've employed people all over the place, and actually they're just working on a laptop, and maybe it's not even in this country, maybe it's they've taken the opportunity to put stuff out in other countries or other geographic locations. So from a sovereign data perspective, that's a real problem as well. Contractually, as an MSP and then as a client, you're all signed into these kind of contracts with your people who are actually paying you the money, and they're not necessarily thinking about what these data protection clauses mean and
Mhm.
where they actually relate to. The supply chain is getting ever complicated.
Yeah. And also a lot of people are signing up for services much more freely than they might have been previously. They're not,
Yeah, people can solve their own problems, right? They can just go to a
yeah,
SaaS platform and sign up to it.
yeah, which then creates a raft of problems for you
Yeah,
to,
yeah, 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 yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. It's that it used to be that what they called shadow IT was all the servers and the pieces of the puzzle and the stuff, the physical IT that you didn't know existed or was sitting around, or old NAS boxes that weren't being patched and stuff. That's obviously changed dramatically now, and shadow IT is predominantly these SaaS platforms and these systems where people upload and sign up to them, free trial, upload a load of data to it, and then suddenly your data's sitting in a thing, and that can be done. It happens predominantly in that middle tier of an organization. The owners and the management don't, are right at the top. They're just driving away. Maybe they're worried about the purse strings, but this middle tier just want to do their jobs and want to
Mhm.
get on with their jobs, and then want simple solutions to these things. So, these platforms are so easy to use, and then they're not necessarily wrong. Like, using these platforms isn't wrong. It's the approach sometimes, though, is of just signing up to them without the thought process of what's going on with it.
Exactly. And that's a challenge, isn't it, of being able to utilize these products that make people's lives more scalable and more easy, but not open
Yeah,
themselves up to risks that they might not be understanding that they are opening themselves up to.
yeah. I mean,
And trying to get like almost like a framework in mind so that your clients can know how to grow quickly and safely rather than
yeah.
just in a haphazard way.
Yeah, 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 100%. I mean, traditionally, users aren't malicious and aren't nasty. What they are going to B is helpful. And that is a problem sometimes. It's because they want to work a lot of the time. They want to solve these problems. That's why they put things on USB sticks and take them home with them. That's why they email things to themselves on their personal email accounts, because they're trying to be helpful and trying to carry on working. They're not thinking through the consequences from a data risk and security perspective, because that's all boring and horrible and sort of a bit ethereal and a bit weird. They're thinking, I need to get this finished for the presentation on Friday because I've got my boss is going to be really cross with me if I don't do this. So I'm going to email it to my personal email address. I'm going to work on it over the weekend because that's a good thing. And we need to find ways to support the staff to do these things in the right way, because we don't want, blocks just make people work around it. And so the tools have to work for the users, because if they don't, they'll just work around them.
That's a really good way of putting it. Yeah. Great. Okay. And obviously, we'll come on to how you're actually addressing the challenges that MSPs face. And I think we've covered a little bit there about the sort of the makeup of clients and how they're starting to evolve. I wanted to focus a little bit, though, on for you internally at Nutbourne and your own processes. And before things changed to get to how you operate today, what were, again, maybe if you look back sort of 2 years ago, what do you think were like the main headline challenges that you guys had internally that you really needed to focus on to help you to evolve?
Yeah, I think, look, we've been evolving into an MSP. That we're about 15 years old now as a company, and coming up to that level now. I would say we've spent a predominant amount of that, quite a large amount of that, as a break fix kind of classic, kind of smaller MSP. So over the last 5 to 6 years, we've been really becoming an MSP, like a more mature organization. And traditionally, that comes with more structure and process. More defined roles, more defined understanding. Because it's a bit chaotic before that. It's a bit, what's on fire, let's go and do that. And then, oh, this is on fire now, let's go over and do that. And that is a very traditional route. Like, I see MSPs all the time. I do quite a lot of coaching and bits with other MSPs and stuff. And, it's not a mistake. Most people start MSPs as a single person because they've fallen out of a role, or they've started a job and they want to suddenly do something like this, and then they find themselves running a company they never meant to run because they were just a techie and that's what they wanted to do and it was fun, and they're now running in a company with 15 or 20 employees and clients and contracts and legal and data protection and HR and all this stuff, and it's not what they wanted to do. So that's a very traditional route, and that has become ever more important since the sort of spec, people have started looking at MSPs and supply chain. So in the last 2 to 3 years, the clients and bigger clients have been putting pressure on their supply chain to look at their sort of pieces of the puzzle as you go down this tower of supply. So we're getting clients asking for things they don't even understand now. They're going, oh, we've been asked by one of our contracts, you must have this type of regulation, or you must be SOC 2 certified. It's like, no, we shouldn't be, but these things should be, and these are the things, and actually this is the regulation. So there's a huge amount of education that has to go back the other way as well, and we have to have the process pieces in place to be able to answer those questions, because if we want to play in those markets with the more mature companies who are able to work with those things, they're going to ask those questions in their contracts. They're being told by their legal teams to put this line in because you must ask everybody to have this. So we have to be ready for that. So it's regulation, it's process, it's procedure. These are the things over the last couple of years that we've had to really tighten up on as an MSP to make sure that we are, doing the right things ourselves and protecting ourselves first and foremost, but then also making the right recommendations to our clients.
Yeah. And that preparation, particularly around compliance, is so important, because you obviously, particularly if you've gone from break fix to an MSP, there's, I imagine, that internal determination to like rebrand and almost validate yourselves and show that you can handle those conversations. But there's such a raft of compliance and different frameworks. How, when those queries started to come through, how confident were you guys internally at your ability to sort of understand and sort of guide people through those frameworks?
Well, we had to learn, and we had to get partners to do that with us. So, ultimately, I have quite a lot of experience in that over the last 15 years. That's my world now, is compliance and structure and frameworks and those pieces. But even then, like, I've learned through other people, and that, I think, is one of the most wonderful things about the channel, is that actually it is a very friendly place. And if you've got the right partners and the right vendors and the right people around you, they're there to support you through those conversations and give you that advice. The acronym, or the analogy I like a lot of the time with what an MSP is we are the GPs of the IT world, right? We need to know enough about everything to be able to diagnose, to be able to choose, to be able to help and guide. to be able to put people in the right places. But we're not brain surgeons necessarily, or we're not the person who's going to do the back surgery, right? They're partners who we'll have with us. And you might have some MSPs who have specialisms, and they that's what they do, and that's fine. But the reality is that we need to have a raft of partners and people who work with us, who we trust and we have good process and procedure with, so that we can, when needed, bring those people in or have them augmenting us as an organization. Because if you don't have that as an MSP, and actually you've just got a complete scattershot of partners and stack, then that just adds to the chaos, and it makes it harder to answer all these questions when your clients start coming on and asking those questions in the first place.
When you're looking at those partners to support you, is there a method that you guys have for spotting, firstly, what areas you need a partner to support you with, and secondly, whether a partner is actually suitable to meet your requirements and what you need for that support from them?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think you have all the legal and the framework compliances that are pretty standard nowadays, and you should be looking for things like data sovereignty. Where do they host the data? What kind of contractual clauses do they have? All these pieces, which you need to have a supply chain management piece in place now, because that flows down. But the thing that I think we most focus on is how they do business as an organization. So we refuse now to do business with these companies who ask you to sign into 2,000 licenses, and we'll give you a 6-month ramp, and we'll help you sell it, and it's going to be great. Here's our marketing team. Like, no, because that forces us to do the wrong thing. What that does is it forces us to go and sell a product to clients, maybe whether they like it or not, whether they need it or not, because we have to sell it because we've already signed into a contract. So we're looking for partners who want to grow with us and support us in that growth. So they'll be flexible in their pricing, they'll be flexible in the amount that we can buy, but also that I kind of tend to see these partners now as our augmentation to our company. So there's 35-ish of us, but I would say there's probably 60 to 70, because the reality is each one of my partners brings 2 or 3 employees or support team or whatever, and if I augment them in the right way to my company, then my support desk can lean on their service support team, my sales team can lean on their sales and marketing teams. It means that we are in a better place to service and grow as an organization. So I think it's about making sure that you speak to those partners, understand what they're going to give you back as well. Because I think if you don't get that back from your partners, then you're missing a trick here, because you're having to do everything. And ultimately, we're a sales conduit for them. It is entirely in your vendor's interest for you to be good at selling and better at delivering their product. Because if you deliver their product badly and you sell their product badly, they don't sell their licenses. So the right vendors get that, and they'll support you through that process, and they'll be flexible in the way that they work with you. And that tends to be how we work now. We want to work with companies who want to work with us.
Was that a challenge internally? Because I imagine it would be a lot of maybe the established players in certain markets that maybe have that more traditional approach of you have to commit to X number of licenses. And was it difficult to get your internal team to get bought into the idea that we could go for less established vendors in the market, but ones that actually align with what we're trying to do and how we're trying to evolve in Nutbourne?
I don't think it was a problem so much internally. I think people didn't like it. I think there was an education piece around just learning that there were other people out there. Now, certain people in the market have some distributors in the market have created much more kind of marketplace kind of concepts, if that makes sense, which makes it easier to buy these things now, because that's driving the model down that route, which has been very helpful over the last couple of years. But once you start to work with a few, you start to get the concept is a great idea, but what you are still tied into is contracts, maybe from older ideas, where you're still having to phase those out or move them. And that actually starts to change the way you look at how you provide your services. So rather than providing so when we provide our security training pack, we provide it and we don't ask questions. It's powered by usecure. It's a great product, we really like it, but ultimately we are choosing that, not the client choosing usecure, if that makes sense. And the same for our email security. So last year we changed our entire email security stack for all our clients. It wasn't even a conversation, really. It was like, we are switching this to a different product for you because it is a better product. It is our job to tell you to do this. It's not going to cost you anything. This is the day it's going to happen. Don't worry about it. And we will continue to do that. So we have products in our stack. We have one product, maybe there's a backup product if there's some different features in it, but ultimately we've now aligned our stack to the point that this is the product we offer, this is what it is, and we will make the choice based on the market, because that's our job. We're paid to do that by the client, to choose the best product and to make sure it does the right thing and to provide that service for them. So that was a bit of a challenge, because it's taken time to get to that point where we phased out these more legacy large type contracts with these big commits.
Yeah, that was actually something that I wanted to really touch with, because I think we were at an event last year, Patrick, and we spoke, and you were talking about how you'd adapted how you'd license your clients, and you sort of alluded to it there, where you changed a provider, didn't tell your clients about it, and just basically told them about it. Sorry, but
we did tell them about it. We just didn't get. There was no option really. It was like,
Yeah,
it was a sort of fait accompli. It was like, this is happening, and here's the reasoning behind it. Like, and that was, I think, definitely. Well, we always, when we first did this, it's like pay rises in MSPs. Like, you should put your pricing up every year, but so many MSPs don't, because they're so scared that the clients are going to be annoyed about it. But actually, most of the time when you tell the clients this, 90% of them accept it without even questioning it. And the 10% who don't, you can have a conversation with. And the same for this, you present it as a fait accompli, and then most people couldn't care less what email security platform they're using. So as long as it's better, they're going to be fine with it.
Well, you sort of touched on it a little bit there, but why do you think some partners are so hesitant to go down that same route?
Was in MSPs or as in the?
Yeah, MSPs. Why do you think some MSPs don't feel so confident to do a price increase every year, or
I
to
think we used to
standardize
not
certain product set? It's a route that people have been MSPs have been encouraged to go down for a little while, but
Yep.
not as many MSPs you might expect go down that route. Why do you think?
No, they don't, and I think that's that. We didn't used to either, and I think it's a classic, that growth problem, that as you're smaller, you are, a lot of the time, even as you're bigger, sometimes you can be a big MSP, but still sort of hand to mouth a lot of the time with the wrong profit margins, and not really a key understanding of like how much money we've got in the bank, and how much money each client's bringing in, how much money each managed service is bringing in. And that means that you're nervous about putting the prices up, because you're worried about clients. If I do that, our client might leave, and oh my god, that's awful. Like, and it is bad. You don't want clients to necessarily leave, but if you've got a client who is genuinely going to leave because you're putting your prices up by 5% or 10% or whatever the inflation is, like, I mean, that's life. And if you put all of your clients up by 10% or 5%, and one of the clients leaves, and you're probably going to find that the amount you put it up by is more than that client was worth in the first place, and then you've got more money for less work. So there's lots of ways to justify it, but I do understand why it's hard, because each month, if you haven't got into this world of kind of more predicting ahead and roadmaps and process and systems, sometimes you don't know what's coming in, you don't know what's there, and it is quite a big impact if a client was to leave. So that has to be a slowly approach. You can't do everything at once. You can't do it. The first thing we did years ago, I remember this. I remember sitting down with our finance team as we got them around, and we sat down and we looked at all of our managed services and the bills that we were charging. And for about 6 of them, we weren't even making a profit on the managed service, because we weren't organized enough to get the licenses on the bills fast enough. But our managed service, our partners were definitely billing us like every day. Like, we would get, like, on the month we took the licenses out, we were getting the bill for it. But it may be our process, by the time we closed the projects and done the project and got the bill up to date, it was 2 months down the line. So that was 40 licenses that hadn't hit the bills. And in that's what wiped out the profit of that managed service, if that makes sense. And the other thing that we see all the time is that lots of companies, and we did this, like, we would mark up our managed services like we marked up our hardware. So hardware we make 10-20% on, maybe something like that, if we're lucky. Now we were doing the same on managed services, but we were forgetting the M in managed services. So what we were doing was we were going 10% on usecure or 20% on usecure. That feels fair. It would be, oh, we'd feel bad putting 40 or 50% on this. But the reality is, it's not the same as a laptop, because a laptop, you install a project, you do a project, and you probably charge to do the install of the project. And the same should be thought about with managed services. When you do managed services, you need to be making 40-50% on that managed service, because you need to manage the service. And that happens, and we got ourselves into a bit of a pickle, because we were managing more and more and more without charging for it, because we were still charging break fix costs, and we weren't adding on the manage costs of these additional things we were doing as an organization. And going back to what we said right at the start, that was that doing more and more and more and more for your client, but the price not going up.
Yeah,
You just burn all your staff out.
Exactly. And then erode your margins over time almost by accident. And then sometimes when
Yep,
you realize it, the jump up to what you're currently charging and what you should be charging,
it's
it
so
feels
big
so extreme that you don't really have
because you haven't over time done it. And
exactly.
you can do, as I said, if you just focus on like the bottom 10% of clients that aren't charging enough, for example, or one managed service where you're only making 10% on it, maybe, and this month we're just going to put that up by 10% and we're going to bring it to 20% or 30%. The irony is actually the managed services are the easiest thing to bring up because you can blame usecure for that. You'd be like, oh, usecure put the price up, really sorry, we've got to put your price up. And then most clients are like, all right, fine, whatever, like that's life, right? It's the ones which we own that are the harder ones to put up sometimes because they can push back on those a bit more. But stuff that's managed services, like your antivirus product, just put it up by 10%. Like no one's going to care. Like they're getting emails daily from their cleaning company or their electricity company or their whatever company telling them the bill's going up. They're very used to receiving bills that say this is happening. We just in the IT world are very lovely and nice and don't do it. And it's nice, but it's not how to run a profitable business.
Yeah. And I think it does come back to as well, a lot of people start their MSP as a technical person
Yeah,
and don't have the commercial experience and confidence
huge.
to then start to get these processes in place early. And then, like we say, they kind of create a rod for their own back by leaving it too long, and then there's too much of a jump,
It's
and
just
then
too big a gap. Yeah,
trying to make that communication to your which it's not an insurmountable gap, even if you haven't necessarily raised your prices for 3 or
yeah,
4 years and you're finding your margins
yeah.
rapidly decrease. If anything, your long-term clients will probably be surprised that you haven't been increasing your prices.
100%. Yeah,
That you
absolutely. Yeah.
justify over the course of those, even just by inflation as a standalone, you could say, well, it really should have gone up by 15% over the last 3 years. So
But we're only doing 10. Exactly that, 100% that. And I think you do find that. And that this isn't an overnight thing. So, it might take 3, 4, 5 years to become, to get to this point.
yeah.
And it
And
has
so
done for us. Like, it's not like we could suddenly put the prices up overnight.
well, that was so you guys obviously have gone through that transition from break fix to MSP and then looking ahead as well, and then that
Yep.
transition with your licensing as well.
Yep.
For those trigger points with those changes, um, was that trigger like numbers based, like you maybe sat down with your finance person, like you said, and sort of said this isn't sustainable? Was it feelings based? Was it a combination of both? How did you determine when that crunch point was where you said, no, we have to change how we
Um,
operate and how we license?
in all honesty, Mark, and me and Marcus are both very open about this. Like we looked at our money and thought we don't have enough money to operate the business. Like, we got to a point where we were like, in 3 months' time, we're not going to have a business left anymore. This isn't working, right? This is 5 or 6 years ago. Like, what are we doing wrong? Like, why is this not working? And I think we'd already reached out to the channel and spoken to some very helpful people and useful people. We were lucky that they were around and we could talk to them, and we got some advice. And people came in and started looking at our information and the figures and were aghast, like, what are you doing? Why are you charging this much? This is ridiculous. Your EBITDA is awful. You can't even see what your figures look like, if that makes sense. And I say this all the time to people, like, it comes down to numbers. Like, figures are the most important thing, and it's a dirty word, and profit is always a horrible thing to talk about. But if you are not making your 15, 20, even 10% profit every month, then you don't have any wiggle room, and that means that you can't react to what's going on in the market. A client leaves, it's a catastrophe. Suddenly you have to invest in a new product or make change for what's coming in AI. I haven't got any money to do that. It's like more money to license. So we have to make money as a business. We have to make profit, and that money has to sit in the account. And you've got to have a really good understanding of your figures to do that. And as business people like me, I didn't have an understanding of how to do that because I was never an accountant. It was never a thing. Like, I know that you send an invoice and you get a bill and one needs to be more than the other, but like, I don't know what monthly management accounts were. I didn't know how you review those. I didn't know what an EBITDA was, all those things. I do now, but that's because I've been taught by other people who understand these things. So we run a really unique model in the managed service world, and it is something that's worth getting advice on, from somebody who understands how your profit and loss and your cost center should be set up so that you can read these things in your profit margins, on your products, and your clients on a relatively easy basis. It shouldn't be a complicated thing to do that. But that for us was the trigger point. Like, it was if we don't make a change, we won't exist anymore. Like, and at that point, me and Marcus were both tired as well. We'd done this for 8 years or so. We'd been running a classic break fix. We were exhausted. We didn't want to run that type of company anymore. So there was a real incentive of, if we can't fix this, we don't want to do this anymore. And that sort of pushed us into this position where we had to go and get advice and get some help. And it can be fixed quite quickly as you start moving forward, because if you start putting a few prices up quite quickly and start maybe getting rid of a few things that you don't need, then actually suddenly that dial can move relatively fast, with regards to sort of the money in the bank at the end of the day.
And also for yourself and Marcus and your team, that feeling of going from almost feeling like you're being pulled by a model to turning into something that's more proactive and
It,
more sustainable. It
yeah,
invigorates you to feel like, okay, we're on the right path now. And also, I believe in
100%.
this model now because I can see how it's mapped out. There's numbers behind it that justify every decision that we've made, what it's
Yep.
going to lead to us as a company, how we can then reinvest that. And therefore, now for me internally, I feel internal peace
Yep.
in going to my customers and saying this is how it's changing and why,
100%.
and they'll pick up on that. They'll feel that validation and
They
that
feel the value.
exactly, that it's not just a number that you plucked out of thin air to see what you can
Yep.
get out of them. It's a logic based step that you've calculated and that you can now justify. And I'm glad we talked about the billing side of things, because I do think that's probably the area most consistently across partners of any size, any territory. It's how to get their billing right is just it's one of the top two concerns I think they typically have, and
Agree.
points where they maybe feel like they don't have as much guidance as they might like to have. So really interested how you guys went through that journey. On the sort of security process side as well, we touched on it a little bit earlier, but Nutbourne offer, I think you term it a benchmark and roadmap strategy session.
Yep.
Could you just talk us through the rationale behind how that offering came about and
Okay.
how
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, so I think the benchmark and roadmap, we don't. That's not optional anymore. So and it's a living thing. So, I used to do the old technical. Remember when we write those benchmarks, those really good benchmarks. They're sort of 15, 20 pages, custom for every client, and you're really proud of them. Really technical documents, and you put them in front of a client, and you literally watch the client shred it in front of your eyes. They just cannot be interested in it, and that was because we weren't talking in a way that the clients wanted to hear. We were excited by tech. We were excited by the latest and shiniest thing. We knew what we wanted to say to them, but we weren't saying it in a very clever way. And it was sort of baffling them with science in the way we did it. So we started internally, and this is where actually Clear Benchmark came from, the platform, was we used it internally ourselves, we started breaking this stuff down into manageable chunks for clients and starting, as we said earlier, let's get the basics right before we start talking about SOC and SIEM. We're not going to mention SOC and SIEM to you if you haven't got MFA turned on. Like, it's not even worth that conversation, because ultimately, the risk reduction you're going to get from turning MFA on across all your platforms is vastly increased. And I do get really frustrated with this industry in the way that some of the vendors sell what I like to call the big metal fence, like that MSPs go and try and sell to their clients this massive metal fence that's going to go around their organization, which is quite expensive. But ultimately, it leaves loads of holes underneath the fence because we've not started with the basics. So the way we approach this risk roadmap and benchmark is we've got 5 levels. With all clients, we benchmark them on an annual basis now. So we benchmark them against Cyber Essentials kind of framework concept, that sort of thing, but we don't call it that. It's all in simple terms. And then we put a roadmap together for the next 12 months aimed at something which we agree with the client. So traditionally, if they haven't got any idea, we'd say, let's put you together a 12-month roadmap that will get you to Cyber Essentials. Like, we're not saying you have to do this. We're just saying this is what your risk looks like. And this is the beautiful thing about it, is if actually what you're doing is just communicating with them in a business way, you're not saying you have to do these things. Like, you put the benchmark in front of them and say, this is what it looks like. This is your risk, not our risk. That immediately de-risks your position because you've told them all the things that they need to do and should do. Then you can say to them, predominantly in those meetings, they tend to say to you, I don't really like that. Can I make it a bit better? I want to get rid of some of the reds, and you go, yeah, of course we can. That's not a problem. Let's put a roadmap together. And we put a 12-month roadmap together. And again, you present the roadmap to them as this is what it would cost. And these are the projects you would need to do to get to Cyber Essentials. Totally get it. You've got a limited budget. What do you think? And they will, it's really surprising. Like, a lot of the time, you might have a 20 or 30,000 pound roadmap you put in front of them, and they're like, oh, okay, great. That's really good. Now let's start to go down that journey with you. And wow, okay, cool. That's good. More traditionally, you might find that they go, oh, that's quite expensive. And you can then start to have conversations as well. Okay, I get that. Maybe we should do this over 2 years then. or over 3 years. Like, because we can't magically make you have money, but you understand that if you do this over 2 years, your risk doesn't reduce, if that makes sense. So this is, again, your risk, your conversation. And in those conversations that you then have on a monthly or a quarterly basis, depending on the client, you really start to get to know them, and you get to know, what's their risk appetite, what do their budgets actually look like. Because as MSPs, a lot of the time we don't have this. We sort of don't really know what their budget is, and we're guessing at whether they want to spend money. Sometimes you go in and put it in front of them and they're like, oh yeah, let's do it. I want it done in 6 months' time. You're like, oh, okay, cool, brilliant. Contract that roadmap down and do more. This is brilliant. Because until you understand their risk appetite and you present them with a journey that they can go on, you're just doing what we always used to do, which is it always feels like you're just asking for more money, because ultimately you're going in one by one and you're putting very complicated quotes together, which you spend a lot of time on. You put them in front of the client. It's like pulling teeth trying to get that quote over the hill. You finally get it in. They then feel they've spent their whole budget for the year. And then you go back again afterwards and go, oh, there's a bit more. 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 And you effectively need to get to the point where you make them understand that it's a journey in IT. It's an operational journey. It's not CapEx, it's OpEx. IT needs to move from that model of, well, let's spend 100 grand on IT every 5 years and then forget about it, to let's spend a little bit regularly and often and move people along a journey. And if you can get them into that place and you can build them from the basics first, it's amazing how fast people start to get on board with the concept of going in the right direction, because the basics are actually quite cheap and actually quite simple. Like, if you without giving away usecure's pricing, with use, if you get usecure, a good antivirus, a good anti-spam, and an MFA platform turned on for them, that's not an expensive thing for a 20-person company to do, and the risk reduction is huge. Like, if you can get those 4 or 5 things in place.
Yeah, it's a brilliant initiative, Jenny, because it combines the threat vectors we were talking about, the compliance push. It puts a strategic plan in front of the client, and like you say, it means then you have justification behind the products that you then suggest to them, because it's not a case of just seeing what sticks. You've already got their buy into the value of that product as an idea. It's just here is now how we're going to then get you aligned with it to then get you to where you need to be for compliance purposes. So it almost takes away the guesswork to a certain degree. And you have that implicit opt-in from them in the first place, because you've already agreed on that roadmap. They've already understood the operational value to them as an organization. Therefore, when it comes to implementing it, to a certain degree, a lot of the groundwork's already done. They've already opted into it, like with the actual roadmap and the plan that you've got with them.
Yeah. So the quotes we wouldn't put a usecure quote in front of anybody. And we don't even talk about products really in the roadmap and strategy, mate. So our benchmark would ask a question around: do you do security training? Do you do data protection training? Do you have good policies in place? And the answer to those things would be usecure. We wouldn't put that in the benchmark. The benchmark that would just be red for those things, and they'd be like, I don't like that. And we're like, okay, I'll tell you what, why don't we put something in? One of the first things we might put on the roadmap might be the usecure product, but we would be called user security training. It's powered by you guys. That's what we put in. But ultimately, we're not having to go and sort of say, oh, you should buy usecure, and here's all the lovely reasons why you should buy it. They've already bought into it because they don't like the red stuff. So they're like, I don't like all this stuff here. And you're like, no, I get that. So this is the solution, and it's going to cost you, I don't know, 40 quid a month to make it go away. And they're like, cool, make it go away, please. And you're like, okay, cool, no problem. And then, because we've not put this big quote in front of them, we don't have to do a big quote. We do a very simple quote, 20 users of usecure, 20 costs of usecure, half a day to install it. This is a vague understanding, and one of your PDFs on the back end explaining it. And it flows straight through because it's pre-agreed and it's installed and it's done. And then that risk is reduced and our problems become less because we don't get as many breaches. The better you make your clients, the less problems you get. And therefore your desk gets less busy as well.
Mm-hmm. And also it stops you from ending up in a technical hole where you end up over explaining how a product works, when in reality, do they really care?
They don't care. They honestly couldn't care less. And they wouldn't care whether it's usecure or a different product. Like at the end of the day, they just want the problem to go away. And it's our job as managed service providers to pick the right product for that. Then they're not meant to understand that. We are an outsourced IT department at the end of the day. And in a company that had IT in-house, the managing director of the company wouldn't be walking through the door going and say, oh, we need usecure. They'd be like, I've heard we need user security training or something. Can we find a product for that? And it would be the IT or the technical team's job to go and find that product and to work out what the solution was and what the project was. And that's who we are in this kind of scenario.
Exactly. And it comes all the way back to what we discussed at the start about how for you guys at Nutbourne, the importance is figuring out which vectors you need a partner to support you with and what your core fundamentals are when you look for a vendor in that space, what you need them to be able to do. Like we spoke about the licensing stuff, spoke about the support. It's having that checklist and that ability to disqualify vendors if you know in the long term they're not going to fit your model and ultimately make your life easier and your clients more secure. So
yeah, 100%. And to revisit them as well, to go back to them and say, is this still doing what we said it would do, or is actually the market changed now and is it good? And that keeps the vendors on their toes as well, because then actually you're working with vendors who will keep developing and keep moving in the right direction, because if they're not, then they know that they're not going to keep these kind of proactive MSPs that want to work with them. So I think it's really important to have partners who are going to move you forward as a company overall and support you in what you do.
And I can imagine when we're talking about the benchmarking and roadmap sort of process, some partners, maybe if they don't have 35 internal staff, maybe they have 5.
Yeah.
I can imagine some of them thinking, well, that's all well and good, but we don't have the resource to do that. Would you say long term actually going through that process means that you get your time back?
I think the one thing I would say is keep it simple. So like our level 1 benchmark that we do has got 18 questions in it. Like that's it. Like we don't, and 3 of them are around MFA. Like, so, it doesn't need to take a long time. The clients do not need this. And this goes back to what I was saying earlier about the custom complex audit reports, the most, including myself, used to write. Like, it takes a very long time to do that. And 90% of what's in that report is irrelevant to the client as far as they're concerned, really. We just feel that we should do that. Don't baffle them with science and don't start with complex things. Start very simple and then build that up. Because if you get it right, it all pays for itself in the end of the day from a concept perspective. Because if you are getting more projects through, you're getting more managed services through. Managed services, obviously, the golden goose of what we do. If you sell managed services, they just keep selling. They're recurring. They happen every month. Therefore, it pays the bills. We know what we've got coming through the door. And I think if we could just hark back to what we were saying earlier about profit, like most MSPs who are evolving don't have enough money to pay enough staff to do the things they're actually doing. So everybody is working too hard and doing too many things because we don't have the right profit margins most of the time in what we do. So if you increase your profit margins, some of that initially is going to go into bringing new staff in and new processes in and new systems in, which will then continue that growth process until you get to the point where that profit margin is exactly where it needs to be. But it's a constant evolution. Like it's a never ending thing. And I would say, the most important thing is not to overcomplicate it, not to do complex reporting, and not to do everyone at once. Like start with 1 client and then 2 clients and then 3 clients. Like that's the way to do it, but do those clients properly. So get 1 client on and get them on a benchmark and get them on a roadmap and get them engaged. And then it's a lot less effort because then they're just going to have a quarterly meeting. And then once they're into the system or whatever the process you determine as an MSP, move on to the next one and then move on to the next one. Because it's that getting them onto the concept that takes a little bit of time. Once they're on it, it just replaces your quarterly meetings. You just do the same thing. You sit down with your clients every quarter and chat to them, and your conversations become so much nicer, because you're not talking about that ticket that was done by Jeff because blah, 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 because everybody knows what's going on. You're talking at a strategic level. You've elevated your conversation with the client, and therefore, it's a much nicer conversation to have.
Absolutely. It's really insightful stuff, Patrick. Thank you.
Oh, sorry, no problem at all.
So, I know we're almost coming up to time. That is.
Oh, yeah, I can't even see time. I don't know.
And I suppose the final question I had to wrap up, which, I mean, to be fair, I think you've just sort of covered it to a certain degree, is if you're an MSP and maybe they're in the situation where Nutbourne were a few years ago, where maybe they are still a little bit in the mindset of break fix. Maybe their licensing isn't quite as aggressive as they might like to be. Maybe they don't have a strategic structure in place to help guide clients down a certain path to a certain end goal. It can feel a little bit overwhelming, I guess, to know where to start. Where do you think, what advice would you give them about what steps they should take, how to start this process? What are the immediate things they should focus on?
So I think immediately, if you aren't already engaged in the channel and the community and other people, then reach out to people who are here. Like anyone that wants to come talk to me, if it's helpful to you, come and talk. Like, I'm very open about, and a lot of the MSPs I know who have been through this are always happy. And I'm only saying that because I speak to people who are further ahead in the journey constantly, and they give me advice about where we should go as a company at Nutbourne and what we should do. So there's always that option. So speak to people to find out what's going on would be the first thing, and then start small. I think that's the other point, is that whenever I speak, I see this so much when I see vendors and these big people talking about packages, and you should be charging £80 per seat and everything should be bundled into it. That is not a reality for most small companies. They cannot go from break fix pricing to suddenly charging £80 a seat. It's just not viable. So as you said earlier, the gap is too big. So what you need to do is just start with a few things. Like, let's check whether our profit margin on all our managed services is 40%, because that's what it should be, 40 to 50%. If it isn't 40%, then we need to slowly, over a period of time, bring our managed service costs up to the right level, because that will immediately bring some more money into the bank. Will give us a bit more profit margin, will give us some more capacity to put some more people or some more systems or more processes in place, relieve a bit of the pressure from the burning sort of flame that is an MSP, and give us the ability to take some steps back. And I think also, as an owner of an MSP, and this is so hard to do, you need to find a way to get out of the operational day to day, like the answering the phone, the picking, the going out to do projects, because you can't run a business and do everything. You need to trust the people around you, bring the right people in to get them, and not be afraid that as you grow, the people who were with you at the start might not be the people who come with you on the journey, and that's life, and that's okay. And it's okay as long as it's done in a managed and a well done way. As you grow and evolve, you're going to need different skill sets and different people in different places, or people are going to need to evolve. So all of those things, you just need to be realistic about. And then I think lastly, find partners who can take some of the pressure off you, who will do some of the work for you, who will help you, be an augmentation to you as an organization, rather than another problem for you to have to sell and solve, because there's so much of that in the old way. You're suddenly stressing about having to sell licenses because you've committed to something. Find a partner that's going to work with you and help you grow as an organization.
It's a great summary, Patrick. Thank you. And
That's
that's a lovely segue into our final bit of the presentation. So
cool.
Look, really useful stuff, Patrick. I
No problem at all.
appreciate you
No, thank
jumping
you for having me. It's been so interesting to talk to you.
Really insightful stuff. Great. Well, look, as Patrick mentioned, it's about also finding vendors that can help you, and that hopefully is where we can come into it for yourselves, MSPs, similar to how we have done with Nutbourne. So I promise you it wouldn't be a product pitch, but at the same time, wouldn't be doing my job.
Just a little one, right? Yeah.
Off a little bit at the end. If you wanted to find out a little bit more about how we can help you on the human risk management side of things, how we can help you with things like gap analysis. So similar to what Patrick said with their sort of strategic roadmap, ways in which we can start with human risk, which is ultimately something that is applicable to every single customer. It's physical, it's tangible, it's something which people have, for better or worse, certain levels of experience with. Human risk can be a really effective route to start opening up more security conversations, start evolving into more of a proactive MSP rather than maybe a more traditional break fix. And we offer a no strings attached NFR. So you can play around with the product, you can get to know it and figure out if it's the right kind of thing that ultimately you as an MSP want to put your name to. That fundamentally is what it comes down to, is it the right product, like Patrick mentioned, that meets what you need as an MSP, both from a product perspective, but also from a partner perspective. So scan the QR code, take out an NFR, test around with it, speak to us, speak to our partners about how they're using the product, and hopefully human risk can be something that can help accelerate yourselves as MSPs as well. So that's everything from us today. Thank you again, Patrick. Real pleasure speaking to you.
No, thank you. It's been really interesting and exciting.
Appreciate it. And thank you everyone for watching along as well. Have a good rest of your day. Thanks.
Bye.